In this video, we are looking at the famous Cross of Gold speech by William Jennings Bryan, delivered at the Democratic National Convention in 1896. Sorry, this video runs a little longer than others, but I wanted to clearly explain the complicated monetary policy that surrounds this source. Before getting into the key points, let's take a look at the context. In the late 1800s, the United States had been rapidly industrializing its economy, which produced a plethora of jobs that attracted millions of immigrants. Some people set out for the West to mine, farm, or work on the railroad. By the 1890s, the last of the Native American wars had ended. Settlers were now attempting to farm and ranch the Great Plains. However, for many farmers and ranchers, especially small-scale family farms, it was difficult to turn a profit. Farmers across the country laid the blame for their indebtedness on railroad companies and bankers. This anger would turn into political movements, including the Granger Movement, Farmers' Alliances, and ultimately the Populist Party. One of the major issues of the Populists was monetary policy, specifically anger about the gold standard. Since the 1790s, the U.S. had shifted back and forth between a gold standard and bimetallism, which was gold and silver. In 1873, a Coinage Act was passed that eliminated silver as a basis for U.S. currency, and so the monetary system was based solely on gold and gold-backed paper money. So from the 1870s to the 1890s, the gold standard and increased efficiency in the economy made goods cheaper and created a stable currency, and even some deflation, which is the increase in value of money in relation to goods and services. For farmers, this is not good, as it means they will receive less for their crops and livestock, which makes their loans for their farms more difficult to pay off. Then the Panic of 1893 occurred and resulted in a deep multi-year recession. There was a movement from the Populist Party, which had merged into a faction of the Democratic Party, that wanted to return to a bimetallism monetary policy. This would inflate the currency, which means decrease the value of U.S. currency. If this happened, farmers would make more for their produce, and it would make paying off their loans easier. The champion of farmers and the populist wing of the Democratic Party was William Jennings Bryan, a representative from Nebraska and a fantastic public speaker. He felt this issue could carry him to the presidency. Bryan was able to organize the bimetallism, or also called Silver Wing, of the Democratic Party, and get it to support his nomination at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And this is where he would make his famous Cross of Gold speech. Now, looking at the key points of Bryan's speech, he argues that this monetary issue of whether to maintain the gold standard or switch to bimetallism is the most contentious issue the Democratic Party ever faced. He said that changing to a policy of bimetallism, also known as free silver, is a policy for the people, and they cannot allow the wealthy bankers to, quote, crucify mankind upon a cross of gold. One of the issues of the bimetallism platform is how to attain the support of industrial workers. Bryan tries to ally the cause with them in his speech. He also compares this monetary fight to Andrew Jackson's fight against the Second National Bank. There are some parallels there. Bryan goes on to speak on a variety of other topics, but he's also sure to bring up a popular topic from the populist wing of the Democratic Party, and that is support for an income tax on the wealthy. Farmers are not a fan of tariffs, and an income tax would allow for a different source of revenue for the government, which could possibly reduce tariffs. It is also seen as a way to tackle income inequality. This will come to pass early in the next century. Moving on to Bryan's intentions. His purpose is to win support of the strong silver faction of the Democratic Party, and hopefully the issue can carry him all the way to the White House. Bryan is intending his speech for the delegates at the convention and the voting public at large. He knows this speech will be printed in newspapers across the country. Bryan is coming at this topic from the point of view of a Nebraska representative. For years, he has heard the complaints and demands of Midwestern farmers. Now, taking a look at who would agree and disagree with Bryan. Many farmers across the country would agree with Bryan, because this policy would increase the value of their goods relative to the nation's currency. Gold supporters, specifically bankers and leaders of large corporations, would disagree with Bryan's speech. The wild card in Bryan's run for the presidency are the industrial workers. Corporate leaders, managers, and other moneyed interests will spend a lot of money to convince workers that Bryan's policies would hurt them, in that inflation would cause the cost of goods and the workers' living expenses to rise faster than their pay. Finally, the legacy of the Cross of Gold speech. Historians consider it one of the greatest speeches in U.S. history. However, despite the speech and vigorous campaign, Bryan will fall short of winning the presidency. He will run again in future elections, but will never win it. The Republican candidate McKinley had the backing of powerful corporate and banking interests. They were able to run an effective campaign that advocated for, quote, sound money, meaning staying with the gold standard and not inflating the currency. Bryan was never able to win over a large amount of industrial workers, and thus lost the heavily populated and industrialized upper Midwest and Northeast. Eventually, the ideas of the Populist Party, including the income tax and abandoning the gold standard, will happen in the 20th century, and will even be taken a step further than bimetallism, as the US government will completely untie the dollar from any commodity and is now a fiat currency, which is simply backed by the government as legal tender. Well, thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please click that like button, check out some other videos, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends.